my name's Bob Foster. I'm from a company called First Option. I'll tell you a little bit about that in a minute. So on the board out there it said Olympic cameras. It is a bit about cameras, but it's a bit about safety and the Olympic arrangements overall. So just so I don't mislead you. Yeah, 'cause, okay, so yeah, I'm from a company called First Option Safety. We're a specialist. We specialise in the media, television, film, entertainment events and so forth. We're pretty new, about 6 years old, but grown quite quickly. We do most of the big indies. We do ITN, we do news, we do some films, and we do some studios like Media City and Wimbledon and a few others. Recent experience, as I mentioned, we do events. We do polo in the park and other the Open and so forth. Reasonably recently, we did Delhi. We did all the health and safety for the host broadcaster in Delhi, which is quite an interesting experience. I'll come on to that in a minute. So, and I think on the back of that, we were asked by the Olympic Broadcasting Services to provide all the safety for all the broadcasters at the Olympics, which is brilliant. So it's so we'll be talking about the safety and arrangements and so forth as we go through, but also quite a bit about how the Olympics are organised from a broadcaster's perspective, what it means for us guys. Yeah. So the Olympic Broadcasting Services, they were set up about 10 years ago because there was a concern that the host broadcaster, which traditionally was from the host nation, were very biased and partisan towards their own, and they wanted all the television and radio images should be impartial. So most of the footage now and the material is done by OBS, which is totally impartial, and all the domestic broadcasters and rights-holding broadcasters put their own voiceovers and so forth on it. They can bring in their own crews, and I'll come back to that in a minute, but essentially nearly all the stuff you see on telly will come from the OBS. The first time it was used, in fact I think it's on the next slide actually, is it? Yeah, it was in Vancouver when OBS did everything. They've slowly been feeding in since about 10 years ago, but in the Vancouver Winter Olympics, all the footage and so forth was from the Olympic Broadcasting Services. In 2012, they set up the Olympic Broadcasting Services London. In Beijing, it was called BOB, Beijing Olympic Broadcasting, but I couldn't get a hat for that. And most of the guys who are running the OBS for London are, as you expect, UK guys, ex-BBC and others. Yeah. And the guys in Madrid, which is where OBS is based, are multinational. There's Greeks, there's Turks, there's Americans, Irish, Brits, all sorts. And that's a deliberate policy because it's not a one-nation state. In the London Games, there are going to be 26 sports. Yeah, which is a couple more than they've had previously. 39 disciplines, and as you can see, quite a lot of 300 odd medals for each discipline. A few more in bronze because of the knockout stage. So it's pretty big. And the Olympic Park, the Olympics is a huge event. There's multiple venues and so forth. Just in the Olympic Park alone, each of these maroony sort of things is a sport. Yep, so as you can see, and there's different venues in there. Clearly there's the athletic stadium, there's the aquatic stadium where there's a number of disciplines. There's boxing, there's basketball, there's BMX biking, etc. Yep, so that's just in the Olympic Park, and that's a sort of gated area with controlled access into it and so forth. The rest of London, though, apologies for the quality of the picture, but it was the only one I could find which might transpose. So, outside the Olympic Park, there's still quite a lot of other venues, whether it's beach volleyball in Horse Cards Parade, tennis in Wimbledon, there's shooting, there's archery, etc. So there's quite a lot going on in the rest of London, and then all the road races, of course. So if you haven't got tickets, go and watch a road race if you really want to see a live event. Yeah. Outside of London, mostly football, but not all. The ones in Glasgow and Manchester and so forth. Eton Dorney at Windsor, they've got some rowing. And Weymouth and Portland, they've got the sailing. They've got mountain biking in Hadley Farm in Essex, and also in Essex they've got the Lee Valley, the white water stuff. So there's quite a lot happening outside. And some of the road races go outside of London as well. So it's quite a complex activity, as you can see. The challenges, yeah, is what a lot of you are involved in, is the camera work. Yeah, because unlike lots of other television and film, where you're also managing what's in front of camera, sports is a bit like journalism, it's observational. So you're recording what's in front. You don't have any control over, what's behind the camera. You don't have any control over what's in front. And so it's not how you get the pictures which is dangerous. Sorry, it's not what you're filming which is dangerous, it's how you get the pictures. Yes, where you put the camera, where you put the camera person, how you rig that camera. And each Olympics brings a level of innovation which they never had before, new cameras, new equipment. Remember the plunge camera? Came in Sydney, went down with the divers into the water, and it's become more sophisticated every time. Yeah. And then a couple of games ago they introduced this, the MobiCam, underwater, and all the safety issues. So for every new camera system, or for every camera platform, there are some inherent risks associated with how you hang the camera. Because if you can't put a cameraman up there, they tend to hang it on a wire. But actually hanging it on the wire is quite dangerous in itself. The MobiCam, they had a problem with one of the games because there was a last-minute change in that they'd rigged it with a mind to where the swimmers went and went diving in. They changed the end they were diving in. And one of the divers went in the shallow end and lacerated the front of the chest because they didn't get the safety right. It's inherent in what we do, isn't it, thinking about safety, but it's, if you don't keep it at your forefront, that's when it trips up and goes wrong. So what our health and safety challenge when we've been working through this, and the same with Delhi, is we look at it in sort of what we call the 5 Cs. But in terms of the level of complexity at these games is significant. So all of the activities, you think it's just the filming, but all the back of house activities as well, is actually the, I won't go through all these, but you'll recognise if you take them out individually, they're a challenge in themselves. And they've all got links to the camera work. So I'll pick on some of those as we go through. But in terms of the different camera types, as I mentioned, there are different innovations on each one. This particular games, they've got some really innovative wire cams, really, really big wire cams. They've just been modifying a Volkswagen Touareg, and they've got gyro-stabilised cameras on them, on extendable masts. It's quite an interesting piece of kit. But you'll recognise all those. This is just, you probably won't be able to read them from there, but I can send the handouts if you wish. But the full range of cameras will be deployed at the games. Yeah, and some cameras you've never even seen of or thought of before now. Some facts and figures, just a bit of data for you in terms of the size and scale. The hours of coverage compared to Beijing are significantly more. Yeah, from just under 4,000 to over 5,500 hours of coverage. The number of cameras, though, is pretty similar. The range of cameras has gone up, but the actual number of cameras is pretty similar. And this is just, when I'm talking about the cameras here, I'm just talking about the cameras for the Olympic Broadcasting Services, not the cameras from the rights-holding broadcasters. There will be additional to that. Yep. And the number of mobile units. The actual Olympic Broadcasting Services personnel are heading towards 6,000 on their own. And again, you're going to have about 150 world broadcasters there with their own crews, just doing their own little inserts and so forth to get their own national flavour. So it's pretty big in that sense. So, and each games brings new innovations, new camera systems. So for the first time, they're going to use HG high definition. Yep. And there'll be quite a lot of that. Surround sound's going to be there. High speed, super, high speed, slow motion, I think that is. And I think it's somewhere between ranging, there's going to be about 60 of those cameras at these games. I think it's the first time they've been deployed. Between 600 and 1,000 frames per second, I'm told. That'll mean a lot more to you than me, but it sounds pretty fast. Yeah. So it's, and then you've got the speciality beauty cams. The beauty cams, and they're all over the place. They're to capture the iconic views in London and around the country. You know, they're from Big Ben or of Big Ben and everywhere else around. And There'll be lots of those, and the super high vision, I'm told, is the next generation of high definition. So it's even 16 times greater definition than the high definition. So that's what's coming. So some of those are going to be deployed for these games. And 3D, there'll be a number of quite a lot of 3D coverage for the first time. Are any of you who've got jobs on the games yet? Yeah, I'm sure there's still quite a bit around to be coming up. There's still some stuff hasn't been agreed. Contracts are still being discussed for some coverage of some areas. Now, these teams here, the Olympic Broadcasting Services are doing all the games, but they're not all British air crews. They're bringing crews from all over the world who work to OBS. And again, this is an additional to the rights-holding broadcasters. The BBC is the domestic rights-holding broadcaster. So they're the Olympic broadcaster for the UK, so they've got the rights to put the footage out or show the programmes in the UK. Channel 4 are the domestic rights-holding broadcaster for the Paralympics. But the actual production crews who are doing it will be varied. Yep. So if you look down there, the OBS crews, but even some of these, if you take, let's pick on sailing. Is sailing up there? Yes, it is, down in Weymouth and Portland. The production company who are doing that is North One. North One TV. So they're not actually full-time OBS crews. The BBC have got a number of events they're covering, and then as you go round, they pull crews in from around the world who've done previous Olympics and have got developed skills in those sports. They often follow that the popular sports of those countries. Japan, for example, are covering the judo. I think it's Greece are covering wrestling. I think China's covering gymnastics and table tennis and that sort of stuff. And Cuba's covering something that they do lots of. I can't remember what is it. Volleyball, yeah. But okay. So it's just to give you a flavour, guys, of what's happening. In terms of the phases of the build, they've been building. The Olympics is on schedule. It's amazing when you compare it to other events in terms of the build and so forth, and the handover. These are the phases of the Olympics. The overlay and installation, that's the build, and the infrastructure. And then they start fitting out with the more technical infrastructure, the broadcasting equipment and so forth. And then the bump is and when the crews, when you guys and others start coming in. Yeah. And then during the pre-Olympics, the security, as you would expect in the parks, increases as you get to here. And then there's almost a lockdown, very little gets in or out without really stringent controls. Now we're still in the fit-out phase, but if you go onto the park now, there's quite tight security. It's like going through airport security. All the vehicles are checked. They've all got sniffer dogs on all the vehicles, so it's quite tight, as you can imagine. So if you're trying to get equipment in there which hasn't been pre-agreed, forget it. Yeah, you've got to go through the due processes. So that was the complexity, I think. We'll talk about the culture in terms of the cultural safety you can expect in the games. And if you compare it to Delhi, when the broadcasters from around the world descended on Delhi, I think it was 47 nations in terms of broadcasters went to Delhi, they got a cultural shock in terms of what the level of safety they're used to compared to what they were at home. Because in Delhi, in India, the regulations are quite stringent, but everyone ignores them. Was anyone in Delhi here? No? Yeah. But, and so this sort of safety, there's no safety precautions essentially. People just do what they want. And in almost every games until London, there have been fatalities in the build. There have been no major accidents in the build of any of the venues. Certainly no fatalities. It's quite unique in the history of these sorts of events. You could argue, and I would sometimes, they go a bit over the top, but it's the culture which is built there. And it's quite a challenge when we're going in at the moment because the standards they've been put in place are for construction, and then you get broadcasters come in who work in a different way, and their safety arrangements don't necessarily fit. So we're trying to push back quite a bit on occasion, not to lower the standard of safety, just to get them to recognise there are different ways of working. sorry, if I go back to the previous slide, so the other cultural challenges, when all the foreign broadcasters come to the UK, some of them won't be used to the higher level of safety that we have. So it's quite the opposite to Delhi in some places, and we'll get quite a lot of pushback from that. So what we're doing to put in place is to provide all the broadcasters, the rights holding broadcasters and visiting production crews with a bit of understanding about the BBC, not the BBC, I used to work for the BBC, sorry, about the OBS policy systems and risk assessments, and we're doing all the work for them so they don't have to reinvent the wheel. The risk assessments for all the camera positions and activities will be done for them and given to them as a safe system of work and placed on a website so they've got ready access to them. So if you're involved in the Olympics, you will also have access to this material. Complacency, oops, in fact I think I jumped complacency there, didn't I? Sorry, I need to check my notes because as I mentioned my colleague Vic did the previous one, so it's complacency. One of the challenges we traditionally have in safety in TV and film and so forth is people get used just do things the same way, the same week in, week out. But you'll be working with people who don't normally work with you and don't necessarily do things in the way that you do. So you need to think about to make sure you get that communication, coordination, etc. with the other guys. Yeah. The level of coordination is pretty high because you've got lots of multiple agencies involved in the Olympics and they all think what they're doing is most important. Yep. And they all think that the way they want to do it is most important. So it really is important that from the broadcasting point of view, you build some good relationship quite quickly, otherwise it falls over. Because you've got the International Olympic Committee, OBS, which are the broadcasters, and then you've got LOCOG, the London Organising Committee for the Olympic Games. They're managing the venues. Yep. And their safety guys are quite strict. They come from construction site backgrounds, where normally they tell people to do something and it's done. We're not used to working in that sort of environment. So you need to be conscious of that and work closely with them. If you're on any of the broadcasting activities and you've got a challenge, then you come to one of the first option team and they'll help sort of ease that pressure a little bit. So the London Organising Committee and Seb Cohen, etc., they've got a commitment to be the most green, the most whatever, and the most safe games ever. And they're achieving it so far, especially during the construction build. They don't want to go there. And so, and I think it's not unreasonable to say the broadcasters should have a similar aim. You know, it's important. We want to get the footage. We want to get it out there, show the world what we can do, but safely. Yep. I'm on my soapbox a bit there, am I? So the health and safety arrangements, I won't go through these in detail because you'll recognise them, but there are policy and systems in place. There are risk assessments for all those work activities, for all the camera platforms, for all the systems and arrangements in place. And there will be a website, and it will be monitored. And the competent advice is my team. We are reasonably competent. We're used to working in telly and film. Most of our guys have been in telly and film for about 20 odd years. And lots of them have been working for sport and work regularly with people like SIS and Sunset and Vine and North One and others. So, in terms of every broadcast venue will have the same structure, so you'll be able to find out who you need to speak to quite quickly. Yep. Some of the terminology is a little bit different from you might find in the UK, but the Broadcast Operations Centre, that will be at the IBC, the International Broadcasting Centre, at the Olympic Park. But at every broadcast venue and every broadcast compound, there'll be a person they call the broadcast venue manager. Most of these guys have been to multiple Olympics. That's their day job. They move from one games to the other. So they're used to coordinating that sort of stuff. And they'll have 4 sort of groups working to them. There'll be a production team, producer, production manager, normal sort of thing, get on a production. Then they'll have a venue technical manager, depending who you normally work with. They're in the BBC, SIS and so forth, they're what they call their engineering managers. In CTV, they're called unit managers, I think, and others, different titles depending on what company you're working with. But they'll be the venue technical managers and will deal with the technical infrastructure in terms of feeds, cameras and all that sort of stuff for each venue. And then you'll have a couple of other guys One who will be making sure people have got whatever information they need to operate wherever they're working, and a logistics person who will help you get the kit that you need in and out of the venues. So that's the main structure. So whatever role you're in, you'll need to make contact with these at some point if you're there. And whatever Olympics or games are in, the structure is the same. It's one that's evolved and works. So there's the calendar of activities which are going on at the moment. At the moment, the venue surveys are still going on. Olympic Broadcasting Services, some of them haven't been handed over yet. Some of the rights holding broadcasters are now starting to look at, see what they want to do. NBC have probably got they're the biggest presence. They're much bigger than the BBC in these games. They've got the rights for the US, and so they're going in. They'll start to put their installations in the next month or so, and the trial events, as they're handed over, as they settle in, will be happening at each of the venues. The trial events are often televised, but not always by OBS. Sometimes by another broadcaster who just wants to put them to air. Okay, so 126 days to go before, it's not long, is it? Yeah, before we're off. I hope there's a little bit of interest there for you guys. Any questions?